Welcome everybody. I am Robert. I'm one of the co-founders of Billon, the company that benefited from Horizon 2020 SME Phase 2 project. How do I share screen? Yes, got it. I was asked to share our steps, how we scaled. Just want to say that we are definitely not a very large company yet, but I think we've grown through that very difficult phase of growing from low tens of employees to almost 100, which is for the founders is one of the most challenging things, because we are slowly changing into the larger organization where you cannot behave as everybody does everything. So that's the biggest challenge. Before I share how we've done it, I would like to describe you very quickly what is Billon, what is company, and what is our vision. So Billon is a blockchain technology provider that joins three simple things: national currencies, document, and allows to data share everything that is on that DLT using the sovereign identity. What we all do, we approach all of the project completely from a bit differently than other blockchain companies. We tend to start with regulation, not to end of them. And this solution later on is deployed into large enterprises to enable them digital transformation, improve their business, and as such. As a company, we are right now about 85 people located in UK and Poland, majority in Poland. 50 of them is IT and tech people, so vast majority. On top of a technology company, we have two regulated entities in terms of payment services. We have e-money licenses in UK provided by FCA and KNF in Poland. In UK, we were part of a regulatory sandbox back in 2017 in the first cohort. And in Poland, we are first e-money license provided by Polish KNF. Throughout, we grew through building the partnership that I will mention that later, a bit later on, to using the large enterprises, FIS, Raiffeisen, Microsoft, Polish Credit Bureau, largest credit bureau in Central Europe, and few others. So far, except of getting EU grants, we are very successful in winning awards. We are part of a FinTech Top 50 Europe in 2018. We won the FinTech Festival Award previous year in Singapore. So there is a lot of things that helps us to grow that business, at least to make a big and nice PR about our company. I want to start with something that always I've loved, that scaling up and building a startup is very simple, because all you need is client, a very motivated team, great idea, and a great team. So where I will show you how we grew that in the process and across all of those dimensions: clients, team, investors, and a simple processes. So let's start with the clients. I know it doesn't apply to everybody. This is mainly to the companies that offer the services to large enterprises. So what we've learned, so I'll show you our journey. We started to look for POC trials among board members of the companies we knew. Okay, so we went to the various Polish banks, large enterprises in Poland, and initially the first calls were always great. We always could convince the board members that we are the one to try. However, at that point, we went into implementation phase, and that's when trouble started. So going down to the operation team, there was always a challenge, other work, other project that we had to fight with, making the implementation process extremely long. So guys, my great advice: don't try to create the processes and the paths that are not created, because it'll be always a challenge. Try to use what already there is on the market. Both of the most innovative companies that we faced have their own program, accelerators, incubators. There are different types of competitions. I can share the ideas with that the two, I think, the greatest ones. So we are the part of an accelerator that by FIS. FIS is the largest core banking producer of the world. And and we started from the accelerator, we moved into small POCs, and right now we are past the MVP phase. So we are implemented in their modern banking platform that allows us to reach their target customers' banks. The second example that I have is Raiffeisen. We were part of the accelerator last year, and right now we are started with a small POCs, and then we are moving it across to already a pilot implementation with their clients. It is always difficult to get to the accelerator. You need to know how to use it, but if you crack this, it's much simpler than trying to find a big client that as a small company try to implement something in a large enterprise is always a huge challenge. I know that the companies very early try to find a big pockets of the money. The best way to fundraise is not try to look after the investor. The best way is when the investors start to look for you. So you always know that you are ready for the next round if you start to receive the calls of saying, guys, I want to invest of you. You always start with the friends, family, and fools. That's always the start from the small startups. I don't need to mention that the grants are one of the best way to scale up. Although they bring some of administrative overhead, that's one of the best money that you can have, right? Because it's non-dilutive. It allows you to grow over there. While having grants, the best way is then later on to look after the good group of angel investors. Angels investors, I listened to the question just before my call about having those investors, how you can leverage them and so on. Definitely, when getting an angel investor, it's not only money, okay? You need to find out how to use them. You need to use them as a smart money. Each angel investor that you bring in, allows you to grow your business via their point of contact, their knowledge, and so on. Of course, you need to manage them, and there is always a hassle and overhead that you need to take care of it. But I think there are still much more to be managed than venture capitals. Right now, Billon doesn't have a huge venture capital. The biggest one is actually FIS one. So FIS is not only our client, but the investor, which is also a benefit for going through the accelerators. Venture capitals, as I said, will start calling you when you are ready for them. Trying to convince them and sell their vision is usually great, but if you are not ready, you will get blocked at some stage. So you will go to the first, second, third meeting, and if you do not have, for example, revenue levels that they expect, you will always fail. Team and organization structure. When I started the Billon, it was just few people of a company. Back in 2013, 14, I joined full-time in 2014. So basically the management of that team was pretty much everybody was doing everything. you start to learn that you need to change your organization when these 2-3 founders cannot control everything, right? So you just are not anymore allowed to talk. You cannot afford to talk to every person each week for half an hour to understand his pain points and so on. That's the time where you need to implement organization structure. Stay it as flat as it possible, meaning don't create a long organization chart as you saw in the large enterprises, but you need to implement one. At the same that's the time where both founders need to give up some of their responsibility. That means that you need to bring in other people. So on the one hand side, don't be afraid of getting maybe one of your angel investor, maybe somebody else that as a other board member, even a CEO of a company. Since the beginning of the last year, our company is run by a new CEO, which is not founder, that really helps us to structure those companies. It brings a great deal to the company if you can prove that your CEO has a great track record, I don't know, being a CEO of a bank, of a financial institution, of a telco, so on. And trust me, there are people that want to build something from scratch and so on. They are very interesting. Last but not least, everybody needs to know who is their boss. Especially, I learned that it's important in IT teams. They need to know who to reach in order to ask questions, fight for them, and so on. So that's the time where you need to define the roles and responsibilities. Processes. I have one of the things that one of the motivations that people join the startups, that was at least my motivation to run a startup, where because when I was working for large corporation, I used to work for Orange before that to work for McKinsey, and because of the processes, I felt that I am a small piece in the large machine. And if you take out that piece, the machine wouldn't notice that. And no matter who you are in the large organization, that becomes the problem. Even if you are CEO and you stop to be CEO, immediately there won't be any effect. So those processes really drive those companies. While in startups, people drive the companies. So you need to find something in between, a compromise in between, that there are processes, but the processes are not there to be for the process itself. So definitely, if you are an IT company, definitely you need the support processes. You need to have the IT development process that everybody knows and follows. Fun enough, what I learned that COVID-19 case where we started to work from completely remotely. Right now, we pretty much sent all of the people to home, force that and speed up the process implementation. And I believe that, fun enough, that COVID-19 helped us to become a better organization. I think it's a bit different than with the processes running the regulated entities, because then before you do anything, you have to document everything and submit it to the regulator, but that's a different story. Guys, thank you for listening to me. I hope I was at least a bit helpful. And if you have any questions, let me know.
Okay, thank you very much, Robert, for your contribution. If anyone has any question for him, you can either ask it through the chat or use the raise hand feature. I would just ask you a bit on how you did manage your team remotely now with the COVID-19 outbreak. So what were your strategies, and how did you keep your team motivated to continue working as they were in the office?
All right. Unfortunately, our COVID strategy call started with a big challenge. We needed to reduce the salaries of majority of the team. So that did not help. So that was the first challenge that we have, that we managed it. So the first thing, we significantly increase the number of short meetings. So each team, each project has 20 minutes status session together with the bosses. We as a board never talked so much as during COVID session. So each day we have 5 of us meets on a call with where we answer when we share the statuses of a progress. So building that platform to people to talk is absolutely crucial. Then however, the second thing that I learned is that there is no one fit them all. So each team has a different set of people, different needs of communication. After a month running a COVID of a thing, we ran a survey, and pretty much the same amount of people said that we are meeting too frequently as we are meeting not frequent enough. So unfortunately, it needs to be tailored to the people. Collaboration tools, it's great. Zooms, Meets, Microsoft Teams, then chats, everything work really great. People, I'm so surprised how people are contributing, or our corporate chats where they discuss the problems and so on. The last but not least, I included more people in discussing with a client. So whenever there was a client discussion, usually it was myself or other board members and the project manager. Right now, more people participate. So actually, they know more of the needs of a client than they knew before.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. I know that we have another question. Dimitris, do you want to unmute yourself and ask Robert your question?
Yeah, thank you, Robert, for your presentation. It was very nice and informative. My question is, because I've seen that obviously you've been through this scale-up process and you've been hiring a lot of people in the process. What's your main driver when you try to hire someone? Is that their CV per se, or is it the personality? Obviously, you're going to look at both, but my question is, what's your main driver behind hiring?
The best driver behind hiring is neither of those. It's actually a recommendation of your team. So if you can introduce some referral process that, I don't know, you pay people for the first salary of that person or something like that, it really brings up someone, because nobody will recommend a person that he doesn't want to work with. Because it is the largest challenge we have on the IT market, because it's very hot market in Poland. So finding the right people, at the same time not being able to raise with the salaries of, I don't know, Accentures, IBMs of this world, is always a challenge. We used small headhunting company that we built, 2 of them, that we built a great relationship of them. So they really understand what we need. And they did the first screening for us. Then I think, depending on the work, it's either CV or personality. For the IT people, what we've done, we created the competence test. So each person that went through our process on the IT side needed to write some algorithms, a piece of code or something like that.
Okay, thank you, Dimitri, for your question, and thank you very much, Robert, for your contribution.